Amen. We were in Hebrews chapter 8 yesterday, and we read from verse 10. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind, and I'll write them in their hearts. And I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. But I want to back up a little bit. So if we begin from verse 6, that's a natural break in the chapter. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my laws into their mind, write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbour, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. And we'll go to the end. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. In that he saith a new covenant, he hath made the first old. Now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. Peter says of Paul's writing, they're difficult. If everybody agrees with that. Why is writing so difficult? Is it because he's a complicated writer? Or is it because he deliberately makes it difficult? Why is his writing complicated? He speaks like Christ. Shouldn't that make it?
So if they're asking for Christ to explain parables, I see a lot of similarity in these words as Christ.
Let's just go to 2 Peter 3:15, just to see how Peter describes it. Second Peter 3:15. And account that the long suffering of our Lord is salvation, even as our beloved Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of things in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable wrest, as they do also the other scriptures, unto their own destruction. What does that mean to you? As well.
At one level, it means that God has purposefully made it so, like the parables, so that it would be a stumbling block to some folks.
What about if you're an earnest learner, seeker after truth? Are his writings difficult then? Are they hard to be understood? If you're an earnest seeker for truth.
There seems to be two classes, the learned and unlearned.
Sorry?
There seems to be two classes.
So there are two classes.
Yeah.
So my question is, if you're on the good side, are his writings hard to understand?
No.
So there's a no.
As I said, it said they that are unlearned, they rest it.
Did that answer my question?
So it would seem as if to the unlearned it is hard, but to the learned it is not.
Okay, so you agree with Sister Shamila? So I presume everybody finds the scriptures easy. So that means you're all on the bad side then. If you're going to make that statement, if you're going to make that assertion, because the unlearned are the wicked, the ones who are not wise. Unlearned means not wise. So that means we're all wicked then. So everyone's a tear, however you want to describe it, if you find his writings easy.
Unlearned is ignorant.
Yeah? So ignorant is the opposite of being wise. We've got to take that prophetic. You said yourself there are two classes. So the two classes, there must be a wise class who are learned, and if you're going to say that it's the learned that find it hard, that means the other ones must find it easy. Sister Olivine?
He says the unlearned rested to their own destruction.
What does the word rest mean?
Twist.
Anybody else? Sister Shamila?
To wrench or to torture.
To wrench or to torture. So
Yes,
they get his words and they torture them.
Pervert.
Pervert. When it says you wrench, it's not a spanner wrench. What is the wrench?
Rest.
Sorry?
To twist.
To twist. You pull it out of its context. Why is his writing so difficult?
Because you have to understand it, like who he's talking to, and I guess context.
Brother Bob?
I sense that there's an element of not only his writing necessarily, but in spirit of prophecy in places where it needs to be understood in the context of when it's going to occur in what God's doing at the very end of time. Because there's a lot of things that even a few months ago, couple of years ago, we didn't understand, but we're understanding now. And did it mean that we weren't trying to understand it at that time? It's because God has a time and a purpose for everything. And I see him revealing these truths to his people now here at the end of time.
Okay, I think there are two reasons, at least two reasons, why his writings are difficult to understand. All those answers were correct. One of them is something that we've already discussed. It's this theme between the church and the world. And the church and the world. So I'm just going to do it that way. I'm not going to explain it any further because we've already spoken about this before. And this throws everything out of kilter. The church, Adventism, could never have imagined that God would now look upon them at the end of the world and think they're totally lost and undone, and he's going to consider them not through retribution but through mercy, that they're as good as the world. Because, we can say it in so many different ways. This is Babylon, another way of expressing Babylon. We're worse than Babylon. Because we've voluntarily gone into the world and committed whoredoms with the world. So this is taking everyone by surprise. And it seems to be taking our church by surprise. And I think it also takes some of us in the movement by surprise. So that's one of the things that makes it difficult to swallow what Paul is teaching. And if you don't see that theme running through his epistles, some of the things just don't make sense. So the church in the world and the church in the world. Do you understand what that means? Sister Shamila?
No, but I think we're probably going to progress.
I wasn't going to progress because we've already done this. This is them. This is us.
Yeah.
This is Laodicea with the world, and this is Ephesus with the world.
Okay. Yeah.
By the way, if we take the scriptures as read linearly, when does Paul begin his ministry? If we were going to bring it to an end-time application, if you just took it all sequentially, where would we mark the beginning of his ministry? He calls himself the apostle to the Gentiles. We know that. So where would his ministry be? Sunday law. Be Sunday law. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah? Because he comes into ministry in AD 34, and AD 34 is the division between the gospel going to the Jews and to the Gentiles. The 490 and the 1810. And half of his epistles, half of the New Testament, I don't mean literally half, who's he directing? Who's his target audience? Obviously it would be the Gentiles, with the way that I'm talking about the half. Sorry? The Jews. So we say Adventism closes its probation when? The Sunday law. So how can you be going to Adventists and trying to induce them, seduce them, invite them to come into Ephesus when it's already too late? So that's a complication about this, the whole way he frames this. So when we read his writings, if you don't understand how to repeat and enlarge or combine histories together, you're going to come to all strange doctrines. And one of them is that after the Sunday law, what is there hope for? There's hope for SDAs because their probation hasn't really closed if you follow the ministry of Paul sequentially. So I don't want to go into further into that if people can conceptualize that. Anybody struggling with that idea? That it's a difficulty that you have to address. We're in the book of Hebrews, it's to Hebrews. What is the point of writing to Hebrews after 34 AD? There's no point. If you're going to say 34 AD is the Sunday law. So then you have to start doing fractals and then you have to start combining things together. It becomes complicated. So what might apparently seem a simple line that we have suddenly becomes complicated. And there are people who are saying our line is very simple and straightforward, and the methodology you use for one example can be used in another example, and it just can't be. Does that make sense? So if you were going to combine that work, where would you place AD 34 in our line? Sorry? Midnight cry. Can we see why that would be? We'll do Sunday law. We've got 9/11, Sunday law, close of probation. So if we just use that as a template for the priests, what would this one be? For the priests, this would be midnight, and this would be, okay, I'll call it, I'll just call it that then, PBM, and then this would be 9/11. But for Adventists, the whole church, what would this marker be? This would be Sunday law. I'll call that midnight cry. So then this would be midnight cry, not French, English. Midnight cry, and again this would be 9/11. Can you see how, depending on the point that you're trying to make, how you would use the lines? So you could see that it would be this line here, 27, 34, and we'll go with 70 here, that this would be at this scale where you go to still going to the Levites, and now you're introducing the Gentiles into the story. So it's not that straightforward to say that you can just take things linearly. I'll give one more example. When you go to Daniel 40 to 45, everybody knows it's Daniel 11. If you're not careful, you would assume that all of this is happening sequentially. Some of it is and some of it is not. So let's run this sequentially. I'm not going to read the verses because we're familiar with it. So what would be the first event? Verse 40? Yeah? So I'll call that 1A and 1B, because you've got two dates, 1798, 1989. But this is not just 1989, is it? This is going to take you through midnight cry, and 41 would be number 2. Yeah? So this is the United States, and this is Russia and France. What's 42? The world? I'll put WW, worldwide. And what's 43? That's the world? Everybody agree with that? So, what's 44?
Message.
So this is the message. And this one? 45? What's happening there?
He shall come to them.
But there's more in the verse than just coming to his end. So maybe we'll read that then. And he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas in the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. So it's not just COP, he's coming to his end. Can I say that there's a fight? Yeah? Between the king of the north and who? The glorious holy mountain. And if you run that back to Daniel chapter 2, this glorious holy mountain is what? Sorry? It's the stone kingdom. Yeah, it's the stone that's cut out that grows. So we could put the stone, and can we put the church triumphant? So you can see a progression in verse 45. So if we start running this linearly or sequentially, we're going to get into problems. You know, big problems, because we identified this as the close of probation, but we know that the close of probation is what? So it's a progressive thing. So if we go to these verses in particular, where did these begin?
Verse 40.
So right back here. Anybody cannot see that? So if I ask somebody, they would tell me why they see that. Brother Richard.
And when it says, when he begins to have his power over the entire world, so you bring the world into the context, that's you can at least see 9/11 in that, and then the tidings out of the east and out of the north, that brings you to time of the end.
So you're saying these ones here, these verses?
I was talking about the messages, I'm sorry.
Okay, just these ones.
Yes.
Okay, I thought you said something else before. So tidings out of the east and north.
Yes. Oh yeah, I did bring in 43, I'm sorry.
So you want to drop them further back?
Yes.
You do as well. So you want to bring them at verse 40?
Well, yeah, yes.
So
That's verse 43.
Sorry? So you want to bring 42 to 45 beginning here, and they run through. Is that how you're saying that?
Yes.
Everybody agree with that?
No.
Do you want to make a defense for your case?
Well, I was looking at verse 43, but when he said he shall have power over the treasure of the gold and silver and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. I was saying it as the progressiveness, well, at least you could see a part of it, because when the kings of the earth start to, come into the picture.
So when did the kings of the earth start coming into the picture?
At a minimum at 9/11, they're in the picture.
So that's the earliest you're going to see them, at 9/11?
I said I can see them there.
Yeah, so that's the earliest that you can see them at 9/11.
Probably not.
Before that or after?
I'm thinking maybe before, but I haven't really. In my brain, I always just thought of 9/11 as something that I
Okay.
can see them. But I didn't think about 1989.
So before we let Elder Jeff make his point, let's just go to this board for a second, because we discussed this, if you remember. Because we were brainstorming, we didn't clean up this board. If you go to Isaiah 46 verse 10, it's not on the board, Isaiah 46 verse 10. Visitors don't come to afternoon class, so they're maybe not aware of this. What did we show from Isaiah 46:10? What we saw, it was a repeat and enlarge. Yeah? We saw it was a message that was given in the darkness, in the captivity, predicting future punishment upon Babylon at the time of the end. Yeah? So this is the destruction of Babylon when you go into chapter 47 at the time of the end. And how did we break down verse 10? Verse 10, now you're worrying me. Verse 10, I'm looking at verse 10. Declaring the end from the beginning and from the ancient times, the things that are not yet done. So we did a chiastic structure on this, and a repeat and enlarge. So someone quickly run through that. The sequence of the verse. It begins with... Sorry? End and beginning.
Ancient times.
Ancient times.
Things not yet.
And not yet.
Yeah.
So we saw it was repeat and enlarge, and we can do this, and we can do this. So when it talks about the beginning and the end, a biblical definition of what end means, it's not any kind of end. End means not yet. And then we picked up the phrase not yet, and we ran it through Revelation 17. And it applies, it's used in a number of different verses. But not yet, in Revelation 17, is the future to Revelation 17. We got that? We remember that? So, when we said it's future to Revelation 17 is head number 6. Is everybody keeping up? Yeah? So, you're not yet, that's not the correct way to do the graphic. So I'm saying end equals not yet. But in Revelation 17, it says it was, is, and not yet. And the is number 6. And so not yet by definition is number 7. So we picked that up. So Isaiah 46 verse 10 is talking about the history when you get to the 7th kingdom, not the 6th. So we did that. Then we said what? When it talks about the end, we're saying this is the end of the world. And the end of the world begins where? At the time of the end. So what we developed was a logic that said here, you can see the 7th kingdom coming into focus at the time of the end, using the proof texting from Isaiah 46 verse 10. So let me just take some of this out that is extraneous. So we see the ultimate, or the end of Isaiah 46 right here. We have the Sunday law, the 7th kingdom has come. This is the 10 kings. And we know that national ruin is preceded by... So we have to see a connection between apostasy and ruin. So we mark in the ruin of the 6th kingdom here at the Sunday law, and it's preceded by national apostasy. And we said, perhaps it's the blue laws. Is that 19th supposed to be there? No. So we made that connection. But we're teaching now that the 7th kingdom, or the transition from the 6th to the 7th, happens before that. And if we're going to run through that logic, I'm saying that the 7th kingdom begins at 1989. So we've got 1989 here, we've got the seventh kingdom. And so just going through this graphic, we've got the seventh kingdom in 1989, 9/11, Midnight Cry and Sunday Law. And what we can see is a cascading fall of the sixth kingdom as you begin in 1989 and get all the way to the Sunday Law. And what we did is we connected each of those 4 waymarks, 89 to Sunday Law, which was ruin, with apostasy. So there could be other apostasy, but we marked 1982. 1982 is what? Sorry?
Ambassador to the Vatican for the U.S.
When the United States sent their ambassador to the US. And then what we saw was this event here becomes the apostasy that leads to the fall. So that's what those red lines are. You see this cascading. So 1989 becomes the apostasy that leads you to 9/11. 9/11 is Psalms 48, Psalms 83. Then 9/11 becomes the apostasy that brings you to Midnight Cry, and Midnight Cry becomes the apostasy that leads you to the Sunday Law. It's not a coincidence that it's the seventh kingdom and it happens 4 times. So we only began to scratch the surface of this. So if that's correct, then 1989, the time of the end, is where you begin to see the kings assembling together. Because right here, plus or minus a year, George Bush is going to stand up and say, we already have the New World Order. It's already here. The New World Order, by definition, is the one world government. We see it going into effect here at 9/11, and we can again see it at the Midnight Cry. The Midnight Cry is the one that we pick up specifically. Why do we pick up that one specifically? Why do we target the Midnight Cry? I've got solid here. What's the reason for that?
Solid Sunday law, so first real Sunday law that is passed.
So I'm using the logic of Daniel 11 verses 1 to 4, the transition from Medo-Persia to Greece. That's where when you overlay that on this line, you know that this one is the real marker where you really transition from the 6th to the 7th kingdom. So I don't know if that was the logic that you were using to say that this worldwide, when he begins to take control, takes you right back to verse 40. Elder Jeff.
I never was in that class where you did that, and I don't have a problem with the logic that you just set forth, and it agrees with something that has been taught all the way through, that in verse 40, it's the story of the beast, the dragon, and the false prophet. They're all there in verse 40. The king of the south is the dragon, the king of the north is the beast, and the chariot, ships, and the horsemen are the false prophet. But symbols have more than one meaning, so to defend my answer earlier on, in that story you also have the healing of the deadly wound, and based upon the fact that pagan Rome had to conquer 3 obstacles and papal Rome had to conquer 3 obstacles, modern Rome in those verses has to conquer 3 obstacles, and those 3 obstacles are finally conquered by verse 43. And verse 44, the tidings out of the east and the north, is the third angel's message, and the third angel's message, the way we're understanding it now, can probably be marked at the prediction before midnight as arriving. So verse 44 is back there in verse 40, at minimum at the prediction before midnight. So I didn't understand what he was saying. If that's what he was saying, I get that logic, but one of the things those verses symbolize is the threefold conquering that precedes the complete restoration of modern Rome.
So if we understand the work of progression, when Ellen White uses the phrase perfect, perfectly fulfilled, how do we understand that? What do we understand that phrase means, perfectly fulfilled? Sorry? Complete. Is that how everybody understands it? Completed. So I would make the assertion that at 9/11, the second angel's message was fulfilled. And if you understand this phrase, perfectly fulfilled, as to mean complete or come to its end, and you understand this in the nature of progression, I would say that in 9/11, the second angel's message was fulfilled perfectly. And what I mean by that is that if we're not careful, we end up doing this. If this was Millerite history, and this is our history, and we have Revelation 14 verse 8 and Revelation 18 verse 2, we end up making the second angel's message two different things. Because she says the fall of Babylon here was incomplete or not perfect, and it shall be perfectly fulfilled at the end. But I want to suggest that the way we should be approaching this is the second angel's message is a singular message that's spanning two dispensations, or at this scale, just a singular dispensation of Adventism. And it's only a singular message. It begins here, and when it begins, is it a perfect message? Is the second angel's message perfect? Yes. Was it perfectly fulfilled in Millerite history? It has to have been. Otherwise, the Millerites could not have gone through a reform line. If it didn't do its perfect work, it could never have accomplished anything for them. Because then you couldn't have a third if it had only done half of its job. It has to run its course and do this work perfectly. But when Ellen White talks about it wasn't perfectly fulfilled, but it will be, she's talking about the beginning and the end. It's not talking about a repeat. It's talking about a continuum. When she says perfectly fulfilled, it means it will come to its end. But you need to have a beginning. And I'm saying all of this, at this scale, is the perfect work of the second angel. Now, if we jump scales back to our own history and say this is not Millerite history, but this is 9/11 and this is Sunday law, you have the same dynamic. The second angel's message is perfectly fulfilled here at 9/11, but its work isn't complete until you get to the Sunday law. And you might argue that it might even be further on, which I think you can develop an argument to actually take it to close of probation, but just leaving it at that level. Now, what people want to do is make these two separate things. Why would they want to do that? Because they want to introduce the concept of typology, that this was one fulfillment and there's a second fulfillment. We should know better than approaching our reform line in that way, because to do that destroys the concept of progression. Sister Kathy.
It would be similar to when the progression goes as far as when we plant something, and at each stage they're perfectly, and as we have progressed through time, we know that the Millerite period was perfect, but in our time it will be the end, and it will be perfectly fulfilled as when the corn is fully ripened. They're always perfect at each stage, but then this is the climax of the perfection of God.
So could I use the word maturity?
Yes, I think that'd be good.
It comes to maturity, this thing that's been progressively moving across or moving through history. The reason why this is important to understand is because if we can make the case that the one world government here begins here at the time of the end and progresses through until you get to it comes to a place where it becomes mature, or its completion, and the work of the message ties out the east and north have the same effect, and this war between the king of the north and the glorious holy mountain, the stone, also comes to its perfect fulfillment. You can see that to understand these verses sequentially, one after the other, gives you problems. So, has everybody agreed with this? At that level, disregarding those verses. Now, if you drop back and go to the beginning of Daniel 11, when we talk about Raphia and Panium, what are the verses that we're going to pick up now that are going to mirror this? So someone shout out the verses to me. I've got 1798, 89, Midnight, and Midnight Cry. Sister Tess?
What does the 2 mean under 41?
It's a step. It's these are sequential. You have your hand up? Oh.
Nobody else does, I guess I will, but
Okay.
I haven't looked at Daniel 11 since we've been in class, but so my memory's a little bit faulty. But I think verse 10, if I'm remembering the even to his fortress part correctly.
So let's go back to here. If
Okay, I'll just pass for now. I gotta look at it again.
Verse 7?
so, we've got verse 7, 89. Brother Richard?
I'm reading it now.
I was hoping to do this quickly with everybody, just because I just want to make a point. I don't want to. It's not an education to go through the verses, so I'm just expecting people to throw out the answers.
Verse 10 for 89. You were looking for a singular verse?
Just a singular verse.
Okay, verse
11.
11 for 11. And 13 through 15 for Midnight Cry.
13.
Okay.
No, 15.
Sandela?
16.
So, if you're not familiar with them, you can write them down and go over that again. So, this Sunday law is what? What verse are we in when we back to these? So this is 41, and this is this is all 40. So people are coming up with the idea that when you run through these verses and it's all sequential, that teaches us that when you approach any Bible story, for instance, Psalm 23, or these verses of end time prophecy, Daniel 11, the first few verses that are repeating and enlarged of these verses, that you can run things sequentially. And that's the way you're supposed to approach our reform line. But the problem with that is everybody agrees that there's a sequence here, 1 and 2. But what's not being considered is all of these. And if you come under the misconception that you're going to take these verses and just run, because you can run them sequentially, that everything else must run sequentially, you come to wrong answers, wrong conclusions. Because I'm saying, if you do all of this, 42, 43, 44 and 45 all begin here at 1b and run through concurrently in their different ways as the message progresses. But this, if you're not careful, would lead you to the conclusion that you can just run away and do things sequentially all the time and every time, whenever you approach any problem. So just wanted to make that point clear. because it's still confusing people that you can run things sequentially. And when you do that, we address this at the prophecy school, you get to the place where you're going to start moving the work of the second angel. You're going to move the work of the second angel from 9/11 to sometime in the future. Let's refresh our minds. Why are people finding Paul's writings difficult?
They're applying their application.
Yeah, but that's not what we just said. The specific thing that we said.
Point in time, they into consideration like the reform line that he's running with. The point in time, which is he's coming in 34 AD. So therefore, half of his writing is still to the Jews. You have to think in context of the Sunday law being 70, not 34.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to show by this. If you're not careful and you just always keep things in this linear fashion, you can come to wrong answers. Paul, he's the apostle to the Gentiles. He comes in at 9/11, at Sunday law, but he's also approaching Jews, Hebrews. So you have to understand that you take two lines and you're going to lay them one on top of the other. That's one problem. The other problem that he has is that he needs to tell Adventists that they're all lost. And Adventists just don't believe that. This is nothing more than the Laodicean message. It's nothing more than that, if we wanted to just say it really briefly. And he's got one other problem. And this other one, for me, is the one that's the most hardest. I find it hard to deal with. The reason I find it hard to deal with is because it's new. The whole concept and the whole idea. In Hebrews 8, he's talking about the covenant. New and old. Now, we could express it in many different ways. But when he's talking about the covenant, the thing that makes his writings difficult, I think, is that he addresses this at two scales or two levels. What are the two levels that he's addressing this issue of covenant with, or at? Not old and new. Not first and second. He's going to deal with the new and old, for sure. But who's he applying this to? Okay, so there's people. So I'm going to say people are the individuals. Who else is he applying this to? Or what else is he applying this to? The church. Or a system. Because in Hebrews 8, he's talking about verse 13. In that he saith a new covenant, he hath made the first old, and now that which decayeth and waxeth old is ready to vanish away. And this is what makes his writings difficult, I think, because when it's the individual, he's talking about the nature of man and how to deal with the sin problem, where the law is embedded in the heart or in the mind. But when he talks about a church, he's going to deal with it in a totally different way. And this is what confuses people. So in Galatians chapter 4, he's going to do the same thing, isn't he? But in Galatians chapter 4, at which scale is he approaching that? When he speaks about, are we familiar with Galatians chapter 4? Not enough for me to just make some comments. Okay, we'll go to Galatians chapter 4. Don't want to read all the verses. From verse 21. Verse 22. For it is written that Abraham had two sons, the one the bondmaid and the other a free woman. So, who's the bondmaid? Hagar. And the free woman? Okay, what scale are we at? Hagar and Sarah. What's that? What are they symbols of? Church. But it said he had two sons. So what are the sons? They're Ishmael and Isaac. Are they talking about the church or are they talking about the individual? So he's introducing this concept over and over again about the issue of the church and the issue of the individual. His focus is not going to be on the sons. His focus is on the women, because he's making a point in Galatians 4 about this system. But he who was born of the bondwoman was born after the flesh, and he of the free woman was born by promise. Okay, so that's verse 23. What does it mean if you're born after the flesh or you're born after the spirit? Not in the literal, we understand that. It's talking about the sons here. Yeah? So what does it mean if you're in the flesh or you're in the spirit? Sorry?
If you were made righteous or not.
If you're made righteous or not. This is Romans chapter 7 and chapter 8. You're either in the flesh or you're in the spirit. And if you're in the flesh, what kind of mind do you have? Carnal. You're carnally minded. And being carnally minded is death. You have to be spiritually minded. So here when he talks about the people who are born, who are after the flesh or after the promise, this is talking about at an individual level, what covenant you're under. Old covenant, new covenant. So I could put old and new if we're happy with that. And in Hebrews chapter 8, he's going to make this distinction between the old and the new. Yeah? But on an individual level, this is talking about the law in the person's heart. So I want to introduce this thought here. We've got a brain and we've got a heart. These are just symbols. Do we understand that? Yeah? So I want to draw a little picture that I've drawn before, but just to refresh our minds. So here's a brain with a brain stem, and I'm saying this brain stem goes into the heart, like that. And I'm going to say that this here is the same as a person, and the brain here becomes the mouth, and from the mouth there's a tube that goes where? Into your belly. Yeah? So if this is your belly, what did we say the belly was a symbol of? Because that's where the overflowing water gushes out from, gushes out of the belly. Yeah? And we know that this statue, his belly and thighs are made of brass, so you've got the same material. So I'm saying if they're the same material, the thighs become a symbol of a belly. And what does Abraham do when he wants to make sure that his servant's going to obey him? He says, get your hand and tuck it under my thigh. Because the thigh is a symbol of the belly. But in that context, what is it a symbol of? It's a covenant. They're going to make a deal. They're going to make a deal because where are you supposed to make covenants? In the thigh. Remember, the thigh isn't the thigh. Yeah, we understand that. The thigh is the belly and the belly is the heart. And where do you need to make covenants? In the heart. And we would call that the new covenant. New covenant is writing the law in a person's heart. Hopefully that makes sense. So at this level here, the new covenant is talking about the law in the heart. We're okay with that? If that's the case, what's the old covenant? Is the old covenant law? The new covenant law. It's all about location, isn't it? About geography. Not about philosophy. You know, we have this argument about what the glorious land is. Is it geography or philosophy? King of the South, the same thing. Is it communism or is it Russia? These things should have been dealt with and addressed with. They were a long time ago and they should have been settled. It's all about geography, not philosophy. And this issue becomes a major issue in our movement now when we start saying the gospel is connected to law. Because it's not about law. It's about Geography. All about geography. So the new covenant is the law in your heart. So what's the old covenant? It's simple. To me, it's as simple as that. It's the law in your mind or the law in your heart. Sorry?
The same.
Did you say the same?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to make I want to push the point that they're not the same. That they're not the same. That they're different faculties of a human being. And under Old Covenant, let's read a passage. This is, it's not in your notes, I'm afraid. This is Desire of Ages, chapter 69. Pretty sure it's no, not 69. It's not 69. It's let me see if I can find it. I don't know. I don't know what word to pick up. I should find it for reasonably quickly, hopefully. Okay, yeah, 50, sorry. Chapter 50, Desire of Ages, chapter 50. Yeah, 456. We'll begin at 455, beginning of the chapter. Chapter 50, Among Snares. So it's beginning of the chapter, 55.1. And I'm going to skip verses 1 and 2, paragraphs 1 and 2. It's all about the spies trying to track Jesus and attack him. So we're looking at 55.3. So we're going to see when the Bible talks about I will write the laws in your mind and your heart, it's going to show you this sequence here in this passage. So what is the sealing? It's intellectual and spiritual. So I'm saying if you're not able to read, if you don't have the intellectual prowess to read, you're never going to know who Jesus was. Now you could argue where you could hear it from someone. Of course, I can understand that. But if there was no one around you, this is just a parallel example, and all you had was a book, if you couldn't read the book, you would never learn about Jesus. Yeah? You could have some kind of built-in sense about him, a law unto themselves, I understand about Gentiles, but you would never understand it. You have to have an intellectual understanding first to understand who Jesus is. Because otherwise, we don't need to go to the world, do we? Because the whole world is worshipping God in their own little way, but they're not worshipping God perfectly. And if you're not worshipping perfectly, you can't have a good relationship with him. It's a dysfunctional relationship. So we're in this passage, 55.3.
456.
455. Did I say 4? Yeah, 455, paragraph 3. My teaching is not mine, said Jesus, but his that sent me. If any man willeth to do his will, he shall know of the teaching, whether it be of God or whether I speak of myself. So all I want to pick up from that is not the issue of the will, but it's the issue that if any man wants to understand the teaching, he can understand it. And that is intellect. The question of these cavaliers, no, it's not cavaliers, it's cavilers. The question of these cavilers, Jesus met, not by answering the cavil, but by opening up truth vital to the salvation of the soul. So this is the point that we want to pick up. The perception and appreciation of truth, he said, depends less upon the mind than upon the heart. So I just want to stop there. So she's distinguishing between mind and heart. Mind and heart, they're two separate faculties of us. And sometimes Ellen White, even the scriptures, are going to just conflate the two and just make it all mind. Sometimes she's going to distinguish between the two. So I'm making this distinction. There's something between the mind and the heart. The truth must be received into the soul. I've already discussed the subject of the soul. For me, I don't like talking about the soul and doing a word study on it, because the soul is used differently in many different contexts. And in this context, what is the soul being used as? As heart. Sometimes the soul is used as the entire being, and sometimes it's used just as the heart. If you can understand that, you'll begin to see why there's a connection between the heart and the entire being when it says man became a living soul, because they are connected, but I didn't want to go there. Truth must be received into the soul. It claims the homage of the will. If truth could be submitted to the reason alone, where's reason? The mind. Pride would be no hindrance in the way of its reception, and pride resides where? In the heart. But it is to be received through the work of grace in the heart, and its reception depends upon the renunciation of every sin that the Spirit of God reveals. And I'm going to say reveals where? In the heart. Man's advantages for obtaining the knowledge of the truth, however great these may be, what's that? Mind. Doesn't matter, however clever you might be or what school you went to, will prove of no benefit to him unless the heart is open to receive the truth. And there is a conscientious surrender of every habit and practice that is opposed to its principles. So where's the habits and the practices? In the heart. That's why Ellen White says it was all heart work with Jesus. It's always about the heart. To those who thus yield themselves to God, having an honest desire to know and to do his will, the truth is revealed as the power of God for their salvation. These will be able to distinguish between him who speaks for God and him who speaks merely from himself. We've discussed this issue before, over and over again. Distinguish between him who speaks for God. This is God against who? Man. Cease ye from man, whose breath is in his nostrils. That's what it means. And he who speaks merely from himself. The Pharisee had not put their will on the side of God's will. They were not seeking to know the truth, but to find some excuse for evading it. Christ showed that this was why they did not understand his teaching. If you don't have the law here, what are you not able to figure out? His teachings?
Whether the message is from God or man.
Can we see that? If you don't have the law in your heart, you don't know if it's from God or it's from man. So let's run that through. If you had a man and the law was here, is this man saved? No. Not saved. So let's give him a title. Wicked. Will we agree with that? Wicked and the wise. The vile. So let's make him a tear or a false prophet. The prophets of Baal. Now remember, we went to the people on Mount Carmel, and what are they unable to do? Distinguish between who is God and who is man. And she says, if you're not able to distinguish that, where is the law? It's only in your mind. And that's what I've said for a long time now. If you're in that group and you can't figure out who is who, you are a tear by definition. And if you want to understand what that means, you're part of the omega. Now, you might not be part of the omega in geography, but you are part of the omega in your understanding, in your relationship to God or man. Can everybody see that logic? I think it's self-defining that if you can't see who God is and who a man is, it's because you don't have the law written in your heart. So only wheat can identify wheat. Can you see that connection? Only the wheat can identify wheat. Because the tares can't identify anybody. Now if you can grab hold of that thought, now you can see what Matthew 13:24-30 is teaching, that these servants can identify who the wheat and the tares are. All that is saying is this, not who is good and who is bad. If you run it through this logic, what is that saying? What are the servants able to identify? Sorry? Truth and error. Truth and error. Who speaks for God and who doesn't speak for God. People have turned that into a criminal offence. It's a criminal offence to actually understand the messages from God, or if it's a message from man. But we all know, I think it's John chapter 10, says, my sheep hear my voice. So now it becomes a criminal offence to be a sheep of God. Is it a criminal offence to be a sheep of God? Depends who you're asking. Depends who you're asking, because it can be. From your own house, from your own brethren, should it be a criminal offence? If you step out of that and you think about the conference structure, is it a criminal offence to be a sheep of Jesus? It is, because you're going to get disfellowshipped. If you claim allegiance to Christ, you're the parents of the blind man, you're going to say, it's got nothing to do with me. It's because it's a criminal offence to be part of that group. Now when that concept and that idea comes into our movement, now you can begin to see that these Samaritans are as much the nominal Adventists as they are the tares. Because these people who begin to accuse are the ones who say, you know what, we don't want anybody to be saved. We don't want people to have a new covenant experience, because we prefer the old. Okay, so just to summarise why we went here. At the individual level, when it speaks about the old and new covenant, I'm saying it's all about law, and that's fine. But the law needs to go through your brain. This is not a real brain, remember? This is the mind. It goes through your brain into your heart, just as it goes through your mouth into your belly. This is the symbology of Ezekiel 2 and 3 and Revelation 10. That's what it's trying to teach us. The symbology that's being used here is the mechanism of entering into a new covenant. Any thoughts or any comments? Anybody want to add anything to that?
I was thinking of spiritual things. Spiritual things can discern spiritual things when you were saying about the wheat. Can know who the wheat are. Just that scripture came to mind.
Brother Bob and then Sister Tess.
A thought, I'm going to kind of throw out a question, is the covenant with death that the people are making, is that holding on to the old covenant that leads to death, because it's only holding on to these truths in their mind? Is that the covenant of death that's talked about in Isaiah 28?
I believe so, yes. Sister Tess?
How do you get it from your mind to your heart?
How do you get it from your mind to your heart? I'm going to say I don't know. I don't know. I can give you word pictures. So we'll do the word picture. There's something here that's blocking this. So if you're going to go to Isaiah 6, or you're going to go to Jeremiah 4, or you're going to go to Matthew 13, and this theme comes up many different places, but we'll just go with those ones. Jeremiah 4, Isaiah 6, and Matthew 13. There's a blockage. There's a blockage in the heart. And what needs to happen is this blockage, which is expressed as gross, fat, and foreskin. Three different things, all meaning the same thing. Sister Tamina? They need to be cut away. So all these things need to be cut away because the law will come into your brain. It's going to come into everyone's brain at some time or another. So when this truth comes into the brain, here, it passes through, and if there's a blockage here, it will never enter into the belly. And this is this experience here. Christ talks about this, if we were to go through this passage really slowly, how you get it into your heart, what in that context that we just read from from chapter 50, Desire of Ages, what was the problem that these people were having? Pride. And what does pride mean in this context? They're saying, we've got the truth, we understand everything, and we don't need your version of the truth. We don't need you to explain that we're lost people. I would suggest that's what that pride would be. It's a kind of spiritual pride that they have the truth and they're not willing to see it from anyone else. Sister Tamina, did you have your hand up? Sister Olivine, Brother Richard.
I was going to ask, in the passage here it says that the Pharisees have not put their will on the side of God's will. So I was wondering if the will, I don't know how to put it in the right words, but our own will is kind of this blockage that it goes into the heart, and it reminded me of the class where we had about the reign, who's reigning our minds. Is it our lower passions or not? It's because there's somebody, the wrong substance is reigning our will, that this is the blockage of us actually receiving the message into, or the law into the heart.
Okay, so this pride, this spiritual pride, that they've got this truth and they're unwilling to listen to anybody else. So they, by default, it had to have gone into their brain. Why would it have had to gone in? Because what's everybody got? Eyes and ears. Having eyes, they cannot see. So I'm saying this is the eyes, this is the ability to see. Having ears, they cannot hear. The ears and the inability to hear. So when you talk to people, it all goes in. 100% retention. Everything that you've ever experienced always goes into your brain. You know, we've got infinite capacity in our brains. Our problem is recall. But the point I want to make on that is, when you speak to people, everything goes in. And this is the message that we have. It's a double-edged sword. You either destroy people or you redeem them, depending upon their response. So if they're unwilling to change, they'll never get that. I know you had your hands up. Just make one more point. So to get rid of this fat, this foreskin, this thing that's gross, you need to have a knife. Yes? So let's read Jeremiah 4, because he's going to tell you what that knife is. So Sister Olivine said circumcision, and I'm saying that's not the point I wanted us to see about what the knife is. So in Isaiah 4, so Isaiah 4:4 is the knife. Jeremiah 4:4 is the knife. But I want to go one verse back. For thus saith the Lord to the men of Judah and Jerusalem, break up your fallow ground and sow not among thorns. And that takes you to Hosea chapter 10. Sorry? Verse 12. Hosea chapter 10 verse 12. So this is this ploughing. It's the knife that cuts into the soil. And you know, I like this, the symbology that's being brought to view here. Just the graphics of that. If you plough a field, you know, I think Brother Tyler was ploughing the field out here a while ago, and it's straight lines, it's furrows. So I often do a picture of a tractor which is running across the fields, and it's in straight lines. And you can show that imagery from Hosea 12, so 10:12, and you run these lines this way. So it's a willingness to accept that the line upon line methodology is what cuts away this fat, this foreskin, which is sin. And it's not moral sin. It's prophetic sin. The ability to get rid of this problem, the willingness to do that, is accepting the line upon line methodology. And once you do that, this law goes into your heart and you begin to have a response to this law, which is a moral response. By the way, if we talk about this, when David says that thy law have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against thee, if you run all of the passages that are connected to that theme, because they're used in William Miller's rules, I'm saying this really badly, you'll see that the way William Miller uses those passages which talk about the law hidden in your heart, he's not talking about the Ten Commandments. He's talking about the whole Bible. It's the whole scripture that he's referring to, which is all prophecy. So I've got Sister Olivine, Brother Richard, then Elder Jeff, Brother Bob. I've got sort of 4 people.
Christ's object lesson, the sore and the stony ground here, I think she deals with that topic as well.
That being what?
Which is what Tess had asked, how do you cut away the fact? She's dealing with why the heart is stony, why it is that the word does not get from the mind into the heart.
So I want to say it's unwillingness, and it's also a rejection of the line upon line methodology. Because when Ellen White's going to do that in Christ's object lesson, she's going to take it morally, I think. And I'm saying if you take this as it runs, it's not moral, it's line upon line.
If you understand the context.
And that's the thing, you have to understand all that morality and make it into a symbol, to understand the symbology of it.
Selfishness and not a will, it's unwillingness to give up your preconceived ways and ideas.
Brother Richard.
I was just seeing it in the picture that you were painting, is that foreskin is preconceived ideas also, especially about the reform line and the work of the plowing that happens between 1989 and 9/11. And so it's like, to chew, you have to do more than just chew the message, you have to swallow it. And that's a part of what makes it go into the belly. But when the Spirit brings the correction to what we've always understood, our preconceived ideas about repentance and things like that, it's showing that if the knife is the plowing, that correction of repentance being from 9/11, but rather being prior to 9/11, it shows that understanding line upon line is the method that God is using to do that heart work. And if we reject that truth about repentance being prior to 9/11, then it proves that we are not allowing the Spirit to do the heart work or the plowing or showing us, that there's repentance before baptism. We miss that. So we can chew all day long and it looks good, but whether or not we accept that truth is what shows if it went to the heart.
Brother Bob?
The passage you brought us to in Desire of Age is the last couple sentences say it very distinctly, that the Pharisees did not put their will on the side of God's will. And then it goes on to say they were not seeking to know the truth, but to find some excuse for evading it. And it says Christ showed that this was why, that they did not understand his teaching.
Elder Jeff?
I like your illustration, and you're claiming that the line upon line methodology is what cuts that blockage out between the brain and the heart. But I'm saying that this message now has reached the point that the people that are rebelling against it are people that are professing to use the line upon line. So how?
He's got
How?
2 right there.
How is it that you're making that claim, knowing full well that some of the people that would be rejecting that claim are professing to use line upon line.
They were not seeking to know the truth, but to find some excuse for evading it. If we go to evangelism, 613 paragraph 1, EV 613 paragraph 1. So I'm going to, she does, this is 1897, so this is 1888 period. She's going to make her defense, her argument is between the church and Wagner and Jones. But I'm going to bring this into a movement level. If we can follow through with that. EV 613 paragraph 1. So I'm going to, we'll read the passage. If you wanted to understand it properly, you'd go back to 612. I'll read 612, but we won't comment on that. It's 613 that I want to read for us to understand. The subsection is false teachers misplace prophecy. So that's what the subtitle is. It's not Ellen White's statement, it's what the compilers have said that is. In our day, as in Christ's day, there may be a misreading and misinterpreting of the scriptures. If the Jews had studied the scriptures with earnest prayerful hearts, their searching would have been rewarded with a true knowledge of the time, and not only the time, but also the manner of Christ's appearing. They would not have ascribed the glorious second appearing of Christ to his first advent. They had the testimony of Daniel, they had the testimony of Isaiah and other prophets, they had the teachings of Moses, and here was Christ in their very midst. And still they were searching the scriptures for evidence in regard to his coming, and they were doing unto Christ the very things that had been prophesied they would do. They were so blinded they knew not what they were doing. I'm saying this is what's happening in our movement now. So she's going to go on about this. And many are doing the same thing today in 1897 because they have not had experience in the testing messages comprehended in the first, second and third angels' messages. There are those who are searching the scriptures, using line upon line methodology for proof that these messages are still in the future. They gather together the truthfulness of the messages of the line upon line, that there's a first, second and third angel, but they fail to give them their proper place in prophetic history. Therefore, such are in danger of misleading the people. And that's what's happening now. People are being misled. The people who are being misled are the people who are tares. You and I, we're tares, and we're being misled because we are unable to distinguish between who is God and who is man. When I call people tares or part of the Omega, this is not some death sentence. This is a call to get out of an old covenant and enter into a new, which was the purpose of this message in the first place. I don't know why people say, if I say you're all tares, that you're condemned to death. It's not a condemnation of death. Now, if you're a false prophet and you rejected these truths, you know, if you reject the gospel, you can't be brought back again. But most of us are not in that condition, in that situation. Therefore, such are in danger of misleading the people in regard to locating the messages. They do not see and understand the time of the end, or where to locate, or when to locate the messages. The day of God is coming with stealthy tread, but the supposed wise and great men are prating about higher education. They know not the signs of Christ's coming or the end of the world. And if you applied that at a movement level, that's exactly what's happening here. People are using the line upon line methodology to prove that it's all in the future. And you need to distinguish between the voice of God and the voice of man, because the voice of God, I'm saying, is telling us that these events have already transpired. Elder Jeff, Sister Tamina.
In the passage you read there, the last statement said, they do not see the signs of Christ's second coming. Those people that are doing that are downplaying or rejecting Raphia and the things that are being revealed as coming. But you said, I don't know why people, when you say about terrors, but the answer is, the argument I've heard is, how can a tare change to a wheat? Isn't that field sowed with two different types of seeds? What justification do we have for suggesting that a tare can suddenly become a wheat plant?
Sister Tamina, you can answer that question. No.
I was just gonna point out that she uses several times to locate the messages, and I guess that's again about geography.
Okay. What I did want to comment, it says they know not the signs of Christ's coming or the end of the world. I'm saying the sign of Christ's coming can be understood as being raphia. But I'm saying the sign of Christ's coming is 9/11.
Amen.
It's the incarnation. It's the incarnation that they cannot see. Just that's at the level that we're talking about. But the sign of Christ coming, this is Revelation 18 coming down, bringing righteousness, and they cannot see that this is happening. So Elder Jeff's question is, I'm saying we're all tares, you're all tares, and we have statements that say a tare cannot become a wheat. So I'll say it in this silly way. When we say a tare is a tare and a wheat is a wheat and they can't change, it's not to have this individual experience that transitions from the old and the new. There's that thing to consider. There's also this church system to consider. But I don't know if you're a wheat or a tare until you open your mouth. So I suspect you shouldn't speak. Because so as soon as you start speaking and you tell me what you're believing, then I start knowing what you are. Because the third angel can't go in with a scalpel and literally go into your heart and understand what's going on. Because out of the mouth, what happens? The heart speaks. It's out of the abundance. Yes, the mouth speaks. It's when you speak, then I know that you're a tare. Before that, you can be in hiding and you've got an opportunity to change. I don't know how to conceptualize that except to say it in a silly way. That I don't want to say there's two types of tares, but there's a progressiveness, there's a progression. And most of us, all of us, we all start our journey as tares, don't we? Because we all start our journey as lost and undone. All of us know the law, but it hasn't done a work in us. So when we say that once a tare, always a tare, and once a week, I don't think he's speaking in the context that I want us to see it. That in our experience, in the covenant that we're in, all of us are in a bad place, and we need to transition from one place to another, just like you do from here to here. Because if you're all tares in this situation, how do you ever transition from one place to another? Part of the complication of... No, I won't... no, we'll leave that there, because I won't have time to do it. Does anybody have their hand up? Sister Chimela?
I was just going to say, can we have the ability to read someone's heart because of the way this message is, reading someone's heart, because Christ only can do that, but people will use that argument, you can't read the heart, but...
If someone says, I don't want to watch videos anymore, I don't want to watch videos, I'll work it all by myself. You're not reading their heart. They've stated what's in their heart. They've told you what their belief system is.
Kind of like reading the heart then.
That's how you read the heart when people speak.
Yeah.
Sorry, let's pray, we'll run out of time. Well, I'll try and tidy those thoughts up tomorrow. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you and we want to praise you, Lord, as we begin to try and understand the issue of how those covenants work on an individual and the corporate level. It's this overarching theme that I think makes Paul's writings hard to understand. And Lord, as I've tried to understand these things and spoken to brothers and sisters. Lord, this seems to be the issue that's confronting this movement at this time. How can bad people build a perfect church? Lord, help each of us not to continue in this existence of depravity and sin, but may each of us accept the truth, the methodology that you have given to us to clear away the sin problem in our hearts, to cut away the fat, and to allow the truth to enter into our hearts that we might be saved. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.